Hey guys, welcome back to Ace Recaps. Today I'm going to be explaining a 2021 Hindi horror thriller film titled Chori. The movie starts off at a sugarcane field, where we watch as a pregnant woman runs in fear of some unknown force. She falls to the ground, and we hear a child's voice telling her that he wants to play with her baby and offers her a knife. She begs the unknown force not to kill her baby, but she takes the knife and stabs herself as it looked like she was being controlled. In the next scene, we watch as Sakshi, who is a pregnant school teacher, watches her students play and have a good time. Her husband, Hemant, comes to pick her up, and they drive home. That night, while they are fast asleep, Sakshi wakes up to screams. She runs down and finds a bunch of goons beating up her husband. They threaten him, saying that he has 24 hours to return their money, or they are going to come back and kill all of them. The worried couple, not knowing what to do, decide to leave the city and run away. So at dawn the couple leave along with their driver, Kyla, to his village, which is in a remote area, where nobody would ever find them. They drive for around 300 kilometers and stop in the middle of a sugarcane field. The driver instructs the couple to follow the narrow path which would lead them to his house, as he'd go and park the car. As they walk through the field for some time, they realize that they are lost. They end up in the middle of an intersection with a scarecrow and are now totally confused as to which path they need to take. Hemant then decides to explore one path and asks Sakshi to wait there as she is pregnant. As she waits, she falls asleep. She suddenly wakes up and realizes that it's almost nighttime. She panics and decides to go look for her husband. She walks through the field in the dark for a bit and starts to get scared as she thinks she's lost. But luckily, she comes across a house. She starts screaming her husband's name and he responds. He tells her that he was lost and came looking for her, but she wasn't there. Kajla's wife, Bano, then invites them in and they get seated to have their dinner. After dinner, Hemant and Kyla enjoy some hookah. The ladies come out and the couple then decide to leave their house as it's pretty late. The young couple then have some fun and go to bed for the night. The next morning, Kyla and Hemant decide to walk around the field. As Bano decides to do some chores around the house, Sakshi goes exploring to the abandoned house at the back. She finds the house to be quite scary and then decides to take a walk around the field. As she walks through the field, she comes across an ancient-looking tree and a scary well. She peeps down the well but is suddenly scared by her husband, who was also passing by. That night, Hemant tells Sakshi that he'll be leaving for the city the day after tomorrow, as he'll need to try and find a way to arrange the money. He instructs her to stay back as their baby's life might be in danger and assures her that Bano would take good care of her. Sakshi seems to get upset and walks away. The next day, Sakshi and Bano spend the whole day together. She enjoys her company and they do various different things together. At night, as Sakshi tells her good night to Bano, a small creepy-looking child is seen following Sakshi. She then helps her husband pack his clothes, and tells him to take care of himself in the city. As she wakes up the next morning, her husband has already left. She then notices someone chopping wood outside her window. She goes to investigate and sees a lady, with a scar on her stomach. This is the same girl who was shown in the beginning of the movie. Bano then comes and takes Sakshi into the house. As she grinds wheat, she tells her a lie about what happened to that girl Rani, who's her daughter-in-law. She tells her that one night when she was pregnant, she went into the field all by herself. She suffered an injury and she had to cut open her stomach to take out the dead baby. She tells her that Rani never spoke a word after the incident and her son decided to leave to the city as he had no life there. Sakshi tries to cheer her up by telling her that her unborn child is just like her grandchild too. Bano gives her a weird look and thanks her. That night, Bano tells Sakshi that she's going to go home, finish her chores and be back. As Sakshi walks around the house alone, she hears the bell ring. As she goes to check it out, nobody seems to be there. So she continues walking. She hears the bell ring again and sees a little boy. She asks the boy where he's come from and he just stands still. Suddenly another boy rings the bell behind her and both the boys disappear. As she goes looking for him, he suddenly jumps out and runs away, scaring Sakshi. The kids then start to ring the bells continuously, which irritates Sakshi, so she screams. As she follows the kids, Bano suddenly appears and drags her back into the house and locks all the doors and windows. Bano tells her to stay away from those kids as they are very mischievous. Sakshi persists, saying she wants to play with them as she loves kids. So Bano yells at her and so she goes to bed. The next morning as Sakshi combs her hair, Rani stares at her through the window. So when Sakshi goes to approach her, Rani ignores her and gets back to work as she sees Bano looking at her from the corner. Sakshi then spots the boys and decides to follow them. She then finds an old tape recorder playing a song. She enjoys the music and tries to follow the boys again. They enter the old house and disappear. Sakshi doesn't think much of this and takes the tape recorder with her. Bano looks at the tape recorder, gets mad at her and throws it away. She begs Sakshi to leave the boys alone. Sakshi gets mad at her and yells at her. She then locks herself in the house the entire day. That night Hemant returns from the city. She takes her husband into the house and starts rambling about how Bano is a very weird woman and she must be after their child. They then decide to leave the house. As they leave, Hemant is hit on the head by the driver, Kaila, and Sakshi is knocked out with a chloroform-soaked rag. They are taken to the middle of the sugarcane field and a mysterious ritual is performed on Sakshi. She is then seen being tied to the bed by Bano. She then tells her a story of her past. She tells her that she had 4 sons, and her brother-in-law got married to a witch. 3 of her boys got obsessed with her and were always around her. When the witch got pregnant, she hoped for things to change, but they didn't. So she told her brother-in-law about the issue, who begged his wife to leave the boys alone. The witch did not listen and they got into a huge fight. She ended up stabbing her husband and then cutting open her belly and then jumped into the well. But it did not end there. She cast a spell on the 3 boys and they drowned in the same well. Bano and her husband were devastated. As years passed by, she got her only son married to Rani. But the witch, who still haunts the fields, cast a spell on Rani, and she ended up cutting open her belly too and killing the child. They did not lose hope and they got their son married 2 more times and both the wives ended up cutting themselves open as well. The 4th time he got married, he moved to the city along with his wife. She then tells her that the ritual was performed to save her life. If she manages to survive the next 3 days, the curse will finally be lifted from the family and her son can finally return back home, as his wife is 8 months pregnant too. She apologizes to Sakshi and tells her that whatever she's doing for her son. She tells her that whatever she sees the next 3 days is going to be an illusion and warns her never to repeat the lullaby sung by the witch. She then leaves Sakshi and goes back home. The witch is seen coming for the baby and Sakshi wakes up the next morning with incomplete memories of the previous night. She unties herself and goes looking for her husband. She comes across the old tape recorder again, which freaks her out. So she runs back home and locks herself. She finally sees the 3 boys in the house who tell her that they want to play with her daughter and disappear into thin air. Sakshi then decides to run away, but as she does she looks at the boys and the witch run through the field. As she continues through the field, she comes across the well. She watches as the 3 boys and the witch jump into it. She runs to peep into the well, but realizes it's all just an illusion of the witch. She goes back to the house, climbs to the terrace and sees the scarecrow they had stopped at. So she decides to go there. As she does, she keeps folding leaves to help her find her way back. As she reaches the intersection she tries to find her way out. But all the paths are either blocked or lead back to the same place. She breaks down crying, and finally finds a way back home. As she's close by, she overhears Bano conspiring with her husband to kill her, so she freaks out and locks herself in the house. They break open the door, douse her in gasoline and light her on fire. She screams for her dear life, but suddenly realizes that she's just hallucinating. That night she collects some charcoal and goes back to the intersection. And using the scarecrow as reference, she goes around all the paths and maps the field on her shawl using the charcoal. After hours and hours of looking around, she finally comes across the spot where the ritual was performed and she breaks down crying as she still hasn't found her way out. The next morning she wakes up, and goes back home. She rummages through all the vessels and finally finds some rice to eat. She then washes her face and goes around the house. She then spots the witch and the kids innocently playing a game of hide and seek. The witch finally reveals the truth to Sakshi in an illusion. The witch was actually a fun-loving lady who was pregnant with a baby girl, and the family wasn't happy about this. The boys swore to protect her and her daughter. That's when her husband chases after her and starts beating her with a stick to kill the baby. The boys come over and hand over a knife to her. They then beg their uncle not to beat her, but he slips and falls onto the knife, killing him instantly. Banno hears him scream and informs the family that she killed him. As she tries to sleep that night, she realizes that the family burnt the witch alive for killing her husband. So she goes to try and stop it, but her stomach turns black and she falls to the ground with immense pain. She passes out, and has a glimpse of her baby girl being protected by the three boys. The screen suddenly zooms out and it shows the witch's clasp on the baby too. The next morning when she wakes up, she finds her baby missing. She panics and runs out into the field. As she reaches the well, she's stopped by Banno. They then proceed to throw the baby into the well. Sakshi tries her best to stop them but fails. She looks into the well and sees that the well is filled with 1 million babies. She suddenly snaps out of it and figures out that it was all just a hallucination. A depressed and confused Sakshi is then seen following the boys. The witch finally reveals herself in her true burnt form. Sakshi falls to the ground in fear and the boys offer her a knife. The witch starts to scream and possesses Sakshi to cut open her own stomach. She tries her best to fight it. She begs the witch to let her go and give her one chance to expose her truth to the world as she felt her pain the past 3 days. The witch suddenly disappears and gives her a chance. In the next scene we watch as Sakshi sits outside the house with a knife in her hand. She is then approached by the couple and her husband. The husband asks her to leave as these people are dangerous, but she tells him that the curse will not be lifted until the true story of what happened here gets revealed. She then explains the whole story of what really happened there. The family burnt the witch, Suneni, alive because they thought she killed her husband. But she didn't die from the fire, and gave birth to a baby girl in that condition without anyone's help. The family then took the baby and threw her into the well and Suneni jumped in after trying to save her child. Looking at this, the 3 boys also jumped in trying to save her, but they also died. As years passed by, Suneni stopped the family's lineage from growing. And so once the women were unable to give birth, fearing they'd talk to the outside world, they killed them too. She finally reveals the biggest twist, that the 4th son who murdered all those women is none other than her husband Hemant. She threatens Hemant saying that she will give birth to this girl and there's nothing he can do about it. As she leaves, Hemant goes after her with a knife, but he's suddenly axed by Rani. The movie ends with Sakshi leaving the field with a smile on her face. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Have a great day.